Hi everyone, welcome to another sewing tutorial. In this video, you'll be learning how I made this corset dress with a structure at the shoulder. If this is your first time here, hi, nice to meet you. Consider subscribing to the channel and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and share with your friend. Also, make sure you watch the entire video as you don't want to miss any part of this tutorial, especially while I'll be showing you how to create a bust cage for your bra cup. Without wasting much of our time, let's get started. I'll start by creating my corset pattern for the dress. So I'll mark my bust point, which is 10.5. On the bust is 13.5. My waist is 17 inches plus half inch, that's 17.5. And I'll create a straight line on my waist, my under bust, and also on my bust point. After doing that, I'll go ahead and mark my bust point just to label it on the bust and waist like that. Then I'll go to my shoulder and place my shoulder measurement divided by 2. Then from that point, you go down by 1 inch to create your shoulder slope. From the center, you go in by 3.5, and that is my neckline. So you connect it that way and you get your shoulder slope after connecting it. So now I'll go ahead and mark my armhole length. It is 7.5 inches, and you can just go up by 2 inches from your bust point to get that. Now, whatever I have on my shoulder, I'll place that on this line like this and connect it. Then I'll create a straight line all the way up like that. Then I'll also extend this line out like this. So now I'll find the midpoint of my armhole length. It is 7.5. The midpoint will be 3.75. And from that midpoint, I'll go in by half of an inch, and this is to eliminate bulge at the armhole. So I'll place my bust measurement divided by 4 here and connect it to the half inch and up to the shoulder, like I placed my armhole curve like this. So you just curve that together. Now I'll go to my bust point and measure my nipple to nipple divided by 2. It's 8 inches divided by 2, that's 4, and place it on my waist too. Then you connect it together like this to create a straight line. So now I'll go ahead and measure whatever I have on my shoulder. Here I have 5 inches, and you divide that by 2. Then you go ahead and connect it to the bust point like that, and that will give you like a slant line. Now I'll place my dart measurement at the waist. I'm using half of an inch on both sides, and I'll go down by 1 inch below my bust point like that and connect it to my dart. So you connect your darts to the bust 1 inch below the bust point. So now I'll go ahead and add extra half of an inch to the dart that I have at my under bust, okay? Extra half of an inch on this side and on the other side. Then you connect it straight down to the waist dart like I am doing right here. Now I'll create a curve from my under bust to the 1 inch below the bust point using my armhole curve. Just pay attention to what I am doing here like that, and you do the same thing on the other side like that. So after doing this, I'll measure whatever I have between my bust point and under bust. It is 3 inches, and I'll use that to create a circle around my bust, okay? Take note of how I place my tape. So my tape is starting on the bust line and exactly where my nipple to nipple measurement is, and I'm marking 3 inches all the way round, okay? Make sure you take note, so you mark it all the way around. Now you measure the dart you have on the bust. It's 1.5 inches for me. I'll mark half inch on this side of the cup and 1 inch on the other side like this. Then you go ahead and connect that to the bust point to create the dart for the upper part of the cup. So you connect it like that. Now to make sure that our cup doesn't have like gaping opening at the neckline, I'll tighten that by adding 1/4 of an inch more on both sides of the dart like I did here. Then I'll also connect it back to the bust point like I am doing here. So what I'll do next is to mark my neckline depth. I want 10.5 inches, so you mark it like that. I'll go in by half inch this way and I'll connect it straight. So you see what I'm doing there. So after connecting it, you can go ahead and create your neckline from the dart at the top right there. I wasn't feeling the shape this curve was giving me, so I'll go ahead and do it with my hand. Also, take note that the first curve that I'm doing here is if you don't want any gap in between your corset, you want the cup to be together at the neckline, you can go for this. But I want a little bit of gap between my cup, So I'll go ahead and connect the second point like this. So after connecting it, you see what I'm talking about. So you go ahead and connect the second point. So I'll cancel the first one. I'm using the second one. Now to create my cup, from that point you connect to your underbust. Okay, pay attention to how I'm going to connect this. You go ahead and connect it up like that. Now from the point right here under my armhole, I'll measure whatever I have there. I have 2 inches divided by 2, that's 1 inch. Then from that point you connect it to your underbust. Okay, you see the way I'm curving it like that, and this is to create the shape for the cup. So here what we are doing is to create our cup. So you connect it like that, so you can see that the shape of the cup is coming out. Then you connect from the dart to your armhole like that. So from your bra cup neckline dart, you connect it to your armhole like this. So after doing this, we are almost done. Now we'll input our measurement. We already have our bust measurement divided by 4 right there. So now I'll measure what I have at the dart, and I have 2 inches, so I'll have to replace that. Make sure you replace your dart. Then I'll add 1.5 inches sewing allowance. Then I'll come to my underbust, measure my underbust measurement divided by 4. Then I'll measure my dart. Here I have 1.5. I'll replace my dart, and I'll also go ahead and add 1.5 inches allowance to that. Same thing on my waist measurement divided by 4. I'll mark that. Then I'll measure my dart. I have 1 inch for the dart at the waist. I'll replace that, and I'll also go ahead and mark my 1.5 inches sewing allowance. Then I can go ahead and connect on my line at the side of my pattern like I am doing here. So now our pattern is ready. You cut it out. Make sure you pay attention to the lines that I'm cutting. Okay, you don't want to cut the wrong lines. So I'm cutting through my armhole right here. Then I'll go ahead and cut through my dart. You see the way I'm cutting it, and like that. Then you cut the other side out like this. I usually fast forward this part more, but I want to make sure that you guys know where you'll be cutting. So you cut the other side of the dart. You see how I'm cutting it out. Then you cut it all the way to the upper part of the cup. Then you cut your other side of the cup out. So pay attention to the lines that I'm cutting. Pay attention to the lines that I'm cutting, okay? Then I'll cut that part out like that. So we are done, and this is what your cup should look like if you draft it properly. So to know what side of the cup goes to what side of the pattern, you see that this part matches right here. So that is the part that will be attaching to that part. And for the other side, you see that this part also matches. But for you to be able to know once you cut, so I'll go ahead and label this. I know that this part is my side, so I'll create an arrow saying side, so I know I'm joining that part to the side of my pattern. And I know that this part of the cup will be joined together, okay? So you create an arrow like that, and I know that I'll be attaching this other side to the center side of my pattern. So I write center front, center front. Go ahead and label this whichever way you think you'll be able to recognize which parts you need to sew together, okay? So now I am going to draft my back pattern. So mark my bust point and half length like I did for the front, bust point, half length, and create a straight line on both sides. So after doing that, I'll go ahead and mark my excuse me, I'll mark my shoulder measurement, and that will be 8 inches. Go down by 1 inch. Then I'll mark my neck width, 3.5 inches. Then I'll create my shoulder slope like that. So yes, like this. Then I'll also mark my armhole length, 7.5 inches. And you can, like I said, go up by 2 inches from your bust point to get that. Mark whatever you have on your shoulder and connect it straight up. I'm basically doing everything that I did for the front to this back, except that we don't have a cup for the back pattern. So you find the midpoint of your armhole here, and that is where the midpoint is. You place your bust measurement on the line like this, then you connect it straight up. This time around, we're not going in by 1/2 inch, okay? You just connect it to the midpoint where you mark your midpoint at the armhole length like that. So your nipple to nipple divided by 2, 4 inches. The same thing on the waist, 4 inches, and you connect that straight up to create a straight line. And after doing that, you go ahead and create your dart at the waist, 1/2 inch on both sides, and you just connect this straight up to your bust point. You don't need to come down by 1 inch like we did for the front. So I just labeled this so you can know that that's your bust point and waist. So just connect it straight up like I am showing you right here. You connect the other side too. And after doing this, we'll go ahead and place our bust measurement, which we already did, divided by 4. I'll just go ahead and add 1.5 inches sewing allowance. I'll do the same thing at the waist, my waist measurement divided by 4, and I'll also add 1.5. So I'm still trying to calculate that. So this is my waist divided by 4, 1.5 inches sewing allowance, and replace your dart. Don't forget. So that's 1 inch dart replacement. So you go ahead and connect the lines together at the side like I am doing right here. So after connecting that, we are almost done. I'll go ahead and extend that line that I have on my armhole like that. You see, just kind of extend it out. Then I'll go down by 1 inch. So you see that part is my center back, right? So from this point, I'll connect it to the 1 inch below the line, the way I'm showing you right there. So now from the center of my back pattern, I'll mark 1.5 inches in, and this is to create an opening for the back. I'll also mark that on my waist like this and connect it together. If you notice, I did not add zipper allowance to this back pattern. That's because I'm not using a zipper. And also I subtract extra 1.5 inches, and that's because I want a back opening. So then I'll go ahead and cut out my pattern like I am doing here. So you cut it out this way, then you cut out your dart. So now I'll go ahead and extend the line in between my dart straight up, because I'll be cutting this part into 2 pieces. Okay, just extend that line up and cut your pattern out. So I'll continue cutting this out, and I'll go ahead and cut the rest of my dart out like this. So after cutting my dart out, so I'll just go ahead and tape them. So make sure you are not putting them on top of each other, just side to side. Tape them down like that, and this is what you will have. Now I'll go ahead and draft my skirt pattern. I am drafting directly on my fabric. My half length is 17 inches. I need to subtract that from the length of my skirt, but because I need 1/2 inch to join the top of my skirt to my bodice, so I'll go down by 1/2 inch, and my tape will start from 16.5. So then I'll continue marking my measurement. So my hip line is 26 inches, and the length of my dress is going to be 38 inches like that. Then I'll add 1 inch allowance to that. So you do the same thing on the other side. You mark the length of your dress, you mark where your hip length will be, and you create a straight line like I am showing you right here. So now on this line, I'll input my hip measurement divided by 4, and I'll add 1.5 inches sewing allowance to that. Whatever I have on this line with the allowance, I'll subtract 2 inches from that and place it at the bottom part of my dress at the hem like that. So we have 2 inches distance at the bottom here, and that will give a pencil shape at the bottom. Then you connect from that line to where my arrow is pointing. I'm actually connecting it the wrong way, so I'll later correct that. You connect it to where my arrow was pointing to. So now I'll come back to my waist and input my waist measurements divided by 4. I'll go ahead and add my dart intake. I'll be using 1 inch for my dart, and I'll also add 1.5 inches sewing allowance. Okay, then from that point I'll connect it to my hip, which is the right place. So now I'm connecting it the proper way. From my waist to the hip, I'll connect it straight down, and then you see that now I'm telling you that's the wrong way. You connect from the allowance, you see, from the allowance here to the bottom part. So I'll reconnect that. I hope you guys understand what I'm doing. If you have any question, let me know in the comment section. So now I'll go ahead and input my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2 to get my dart, which is going to be 4 inches right there. So I'll go ahead now and cut out my pattern. It's ready. So you just cut it out like that. So now I'll place the front pattern on the back. My pattern is also folded in 2, and I'll go ahead and make sure I mark 1.5 inches, you see, from the center in like that. That's my zipper allowance. Okay, and my front pattern is starting from that line all the way. Okay, So you will be having extra 1.5 inches at the center back. I'm just trimming off the excess that I have for the back at the top, just to make sure it's equal with my front pattern like this. So now from the zipper allowance, I'll go in by 1/2 inch, and this is me trying to make my back pattern fit well. Then I'll extend the line that I have from my front on the hip to the back like that, and I'll connect it from that 1/2 inch to the line. I'm only doing this for my back pattern, guys. Take note, I'm doing this on the zipper allowance for my back pattern. I'll move this to my camera so you can see. You see that my back pattern is like 1.5 inches more than my front pattern. Okay, so I'll trim out the marking that I did here like this. Can you see that right there? Then I'll go ahead and open up my back pattern. So I'll be having 2 pieces of my back pattern. I hope you guys understand. So now I'll take out the front pattern and I'll just open up my back pattern so you can see that now I have 2 pieces, and the center right here is where my zipper will be. Okay, now I'll go ahead and place my corset pattern on my fabric to cut it out. I'll be cutting 2 pieces of my fabric and 4 pieces of my lining, and I'll go ahead and add 1/2 inch allowance all the way around. So for the other part of the cup, we have 2 pieces of our cup, so 1/2 inch all the way around, 2 pieces of my fabric and 4 pieces of the black lining. For the rest of the corset pattern, I am using my illusion mat for that part. So I'll add 1/2 inch to the top right there, 1/2 inch to the cup area, and 1/2 inch to that side area. Okay, then for the other side, I'll fold my fabric and make sure that the folded edge matches the center of my pattern right there. Do you understand? So the folded edge right there is matching the center. Add 1/2 inch here, 1/2 inch around the cup, and 1/2 inch at the top. Now I'll go ahead and cut my wording for my cup. The wording will be 2 inches shorter than the fabric. Okay, and also the other side of the cup 2 inches shorter. So for the back pattern, I'll add 1/2 inch to the top. That's the waist area. Okay, this is the top. Make sure you note that. And this is the center back. I'll also add 1/2 inch. You can go ahead and label this so you know what part is what, because this pattern will look the same. So that's the center back. This side is the side of the pattern. Okay, so 1/2 inch at the top and the center back. So I'll also cut my lining for my skirt patterns, both the front and the back patterns. Okay, so you cut out your lining. Now I'm ready to join my cup together. So you'll be placing them right side facing each other like this. Make sure you know what part you are joining together. That's why I created an arrow, and you can go ahead and notch it. So you pin it together and you'll be sewing with 1/2 inch round your cup. Okay, then you go ahead and pin this other side together. So I'll pin this together, and I'll do the same thing for my lining. So I'll pin them together. So for the lining, by the time you pin everything together, you have 4 cups. Now that we pin our fabric together, you notice that we have 2, right? So now you go and sew with 1/2 inch all the way. You see how I'm showing you up to that point. Okay, so you see now we have 4 pieces of our lining. So for 2 out of those 4 pieces, I'll be ironing my wording to those. Okay, so I'll take 2 out of those 4 pieces. So I'll be ironing my wording. So this one that I'm working with now will be 1 cup. So I'll iron my interfacing to the back because it has glue. So once you iron it, it will glue together. And I'll do the same thing for this side of the cup. So I'll place my interfacing to the back and I'll go ahead and iron that together. Then I'll also do that for the second cup. So you open it up and you iron your interfacing to both cup pieces. So this is what you have after ironing your interfacing. Now you can go ahead and join your cup together. So place it right side facing each other and sew with 1/2 inch all the way to that point right there. And you do the same thing for the other side of the cup, 1/2 inch round. So now I've sewn my cups and this is what I have. So now make sure you give your cup a good ironing. If you don't want it to have funny shape, you have to iron it. You see me placing it on the cup ball and giving it a good press. So make sure you give your cup a good press. After doing that, you place your main fabric on the padded lining like this. But before we do that, I want to create a bust cage for this cup, and that will make it stand even more firm. So I'll go down by 3/4 of an inch at the top of my fabric, and that is exactly where my wadding is kind of starting from. I trim it down a little bit, so like that. Then from the side here, I'm actually marking 1/2 of an inch, but I'll advise you do 3/4 of an inch, because we'll be joining our cup with 1/2 of an inch. And by the time we had a structure to this cup, it will be a little bit hard. You don't want to start sewing exactly at that 1/2 of an inch. I hope what I'm saying actually makes sense. So just go ahead and mark 3/4 of an inch round, like I'm doing, around the bottom part of the cup and at the top of the cup like that. So now from where we join our cup, you measure whatever you have there and divide it into 2. So that's the midpoint, and also the other side, the midpoint, you mark it. Then you connect that straight down to the line we have at the bottom of our cup, like I am doing here. So just make sure you connect it like that, and you connect the other side too, all the way down to the line we have at the bottom. So now you measure 1.5 inches from where I place my tape like that, and connect it straight out. So 1.5 inches from where my wadding starts. So you connect it straight out like that. Then you also go down by 1.5 inches again, and you connect it like I am doing right here. And these lines will be the guide for you to know where to sew your boning on. Okay, so whatever I do here, I'll do it for the other cup too. So go ahead and repeat everything you did for the first cup to the second cup. So after doing that, this is the boning that I'm using to create the bust cage. So you place it in the center right here and sew on the tip of both sides of the boning. Okay, you place the other one on the next line and sew on the tip of both boning. Now take note, make sure your boning doesn't extend past the lines we did. I'll go ahead and still trim this boning because they seem a little bit long. So you place the third one like I'm doing. You see what I'm saying? Like, make sure it's not extending past that line. Don't let it extend out. Okay, so you sew the side here and you also sew the other side. Okay, I'll be trimming this boning like I said because it's too long. Then I'll place another one across like I'm doing here. You sew the top and you also sew the other side of the boning like this. So you go ahead and keep repeating the same for the next line. So now I'll go ahead and add one extra big boning to the curved part of the cup like that. So you see me shaping that boning just for it to be a little bit curvy. So you place this like I'm showing you right here and you go ahead and start sewing. This will be a little bit difficult to sew because you know the boning is kind of strong, but if you take your time, you'll be able to sew it. Okay, so you sew it all the way around like that. Make sure it's not extending out of the line that we marked. So after sewing, then you place one more at the top right there. You see where I'm placing it all the way to the other side, and you sew the tip here and the other side of the boning. So this is what you have after sewing your Regilene boning to your cup. So you can see it's actually standing well and it's very flexible. You can go ahead and shape this cup. You see me kind of folding it to shape well. So now I'll go ahead and place my fabric. Make sure the sewing part aligns properly like that, and I'll do the same thing for the other side like this. So I'll be placing an hemming gum between my bust cage and my lining, and this is just to glue it together as one piece. If you don't have hemming gum, just go ahead and sew at the tip of both your fabric and your lining together. Sew it at the tip all the way round. So now this is what I have. Now I'll go ahead and take my pattern out of my skin tone mesh. So for this side I have 4 pieces. I cut 4 pieces of that, and that's because I want to double each side of my pattern. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So I have 2 on this side and I have another 2 here like this. So I'll go ahead and arrange that properly. So after doing that, I'll open the center piece, which is that one. So I also cut 2 of those. So I'll open that up. This is one, and I'll place the other one on top of it. Okay, I hope you guys understand what I'm saying. So now I'll go ahead and sew this piece together. Okay, at the top 1/2 inch, I'll sew this part 1/2 inch at the top and 1/2 inch at the side. Okay, top and side. And for this 1/2 inch top and side, just the center one, you sew the top. So this is what I have after sewing. I'll be trimming down my 1/2 inch to like 1/4 inch, like I am doing here. Then I'll turn this out. Okay, so you just go ahead and turn it out like this, and you see what I'll have after turning it like that. So you do the same thing for the other side. Trim it down to like 1/4 inch, and you go ahead and flip it out like we did for the other one. So I also trim the center piece 1/2 inch, and you just turn this one out. You see how I'm doing it like this. So now we are ready to join this piece together, okay, with 1/2 inch. So you place it on each other like that. You see that? And you sew with 1/2 inch. Then you flip it over and place the other side, okay, and you sew with 1/2 inch. Now after sewing, I've not sewn it here. I'm just saying after sewing, you can add your bias now. So to create your bias, I just cut a fabric that is 2 inches wide, and it has to be very long because you'll be cutting multiple bias. So then I'll fold the tip by 1/4 inch here and fold the other side with 1/4 inch like that, then fold it together. You see the way I folded that to create a bias. Then I'll run a stitch at the tip right there to close it up. So make sure that the tip that will be going to the upper part of your corset is neat, okay? So now I'll place my corset, one in the center like this. Another one will be at where I'll be joining the piece together like that. One will go the other way. This, you don't have to do it this exact way. You can do other designs with your bias. This is just what my client wants. So you see me placing one at the other side the way I did for this side. Then on the side, I'll go in by 1/2 inch right there. Then I'll place one right here, and I'll also do the same thing on the other side, going by 1/2 inch and place another one. This looks really pretty, okay? So you just go ahead and top stitch at the tip of both sides of your bias like I am tracing like this. So you top stitch on both sides of the bias. So this is what you have after top stitching. It's neat and beautiful. Now we'll go ahead and add our cup to the bust area. So that will be your neckline for the cup, okay? So now make sure that where you join your cup right there matches where you join your other pattern at the center right there, okay? So at the neckline, we already hemmed the neck for our illusion. So you go down by 1/2 inch, which will be for hemming the neckline for your cup, and you place your mesh starting from that 1/2 inch. So that will be that you left allowance for hemming your cup. Then you start connecting round the bottom part of your cup like I am doing right here, all the way to the other side of the cup, and it will stop 1/2 inch before the top of the cup, and that will be the allowance to hem the upper part, okay? So you do the same thing for the other side of the cup. You go down by 1/2 inch and do that. So this is what you have after joining your cup to the rest of the corset. So I'll place my lining right side facing each other like that, and I'll make sure that I match the lining perfectly like this. So I'll flip this side so you can see what I'm doing. I'll be sewing from where my mesh starts right there all the way around my neckline to the other side, you see, and this is why we left that 1/2 inch, okay, for us to be able to hem the top, and it will match our mesh. And you do the same thing for the other side, right side facing each other. So after sewing, I'll go ahead and flip my lining inside my cup like I am showing you guys, and I'll do the same thing for the other side. And now you notice that our neckline is looking professionally done. Now the neckline is neat. If I turn this way, can you see the neckline is now neat? So to knitting the rough part of the cup, the bottom part right there, at this point I decided to divide the video into two because it's getting too long. The link to the second part, which will be the continuation of this dress, will be in the description below. So make sure you go watch that so you can finish up your dress. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you learned a lot from it. If this tutorial has been helpful, make sure you give me a thumbs up, like, and share with your friends. I'll see you guys in my next tutorial. Bye.